Technology curriculum presentation, Dr. Chesson.
It's my pleasure to introduce Paul McKnight, who's a member of the teaching staff at Arlington High School. Oh, and we also have Kirsten Silverman. Perfect. Come on down. Yeah, you're going to start. So can you get Kirsten's first? As you are well aware, through the generosity of the town and the Capitol Building Committee, the Capitol Committee and the Arlington Educational Foundation, we've had a significant influx of technology dollars into the district. And this is just two examples of the many staff members who are really making strides at transforming their classrooms through the use of technology in order to better meet the needs of all students. You want to give an introduction?
Sure. So I'm Kirsten Silverman, and I'm currently teaching 6th and 7th grade math at the Audison. And so we have iPads for every student in both the 6th grade and 7th grade in our cluster. So.
Besides cleaning the filter, is it work? Oh, go ahead.
So one of the apps that I use often is Google Classroom. And so the nice thing about Google Classroom is that you can sort of share with students everything that you want them to do for a day. So this is one example of one day in my classroom when I had some students that needed to practice from a quiz and retake a quiz, and other students who were able to have a choice in what they were doing. They were playing math practice games, and then I actually had other students who were doing an extension of a different method for long division. So I had 3 different activities going on in my classroom at once, and I was able to manage all of them through the use of Google Classroom because the students knew exactly what they needed to do and where to find the materials. So it was all right in one place. And the other really nice thing about Google Classroom is that you can create digital files for students to interact with and then give everyone a copy of the file. So it automatically sends every student that's connected to Google Classroom a digital copy, and I'm going to show you on the next slide what this was. So I sent every student a couple slides with Explain Everything, and students were able to actually, you can't see it that well, use a protractor and measure the angles and label them in Explain Everything, and they could record their voice and save it at the same time. So it makes students thinking a lot more visible because they don't just have to share their thinking and writing, they can also share it orally. So I could send it out through Google Classroom. Students could take that file, put it in Explain Everything, and then interact with it. And these are 3 other, they're not apps, but online places that I go often to get formative data from students. So Pear Deck is something that we're all using in the 6th grade right now, which is a cross between PowerPoints and the old clickers. And so we have slides that we present to students, and then students can respond to them. As teachers, we can see in real time how students are answering the questions, which students are struggling, which students we need to work with more. It gives us data that we never had before, and it saves everything that students are doing, and then we can actually send it out to them, and it creates individual files for each student, so they get the slides and all their answers, and they can reflect on those through Google Docs, and it all sort of works seamlessly without a lot of work from us, which we really like. Another one that I'm using a lot now is called Go Formative, which is really nice for math because something we always run into with math is that it's not easy for students to type their answers, and so they really need to write them. And that's something that's really nice about the iPad. Students can write right on the screens, and so we can see their math symbols, we can see their drawings. And so in Go Formative, it can work like a quiz, and it can work sort of as giving students feedback, where students get a question, they respond to the question, and again, we can see their answers in real time. The nice thing about Go Formative is they don't have to wait for other students. They can advance to the next question on their own. So it's sort of a cross between Pear Deck and Socrative, which is the last one. So Socrative is, again, a student sort of feedback. We're getting formative data from students. It collects all their data, but students advance to the next question pretty quickly. They're usually shorter questions, not something where they're drawing, they're just typing in an answer. So those are the three things I use the most for formative data, which is really nice.
Mr. Hayner.
Sorry.
Let's begin with this last piece right here.
Yes.
Does it self-correct, or does it depend on you?
Pear Deck does not. Go Formative can self-correct, and so if it's a multiple choice, it'll self-correct, or if it's a short answer, it'll self-correct.
I'm just concerned when you say that they don't have to wait, they can go on. If they've made an error,
Right.
you don't want to reinforce negative
Well,
learning.
formative is, Pear Deck is something where you don't go on by yourself. So it's more of a whole class.
Okay.
I'll use that in the middle of a unit. So students will answer a question. We'll look at everyone's answers. We can see everyone's answers anonymously. And then we'll look at, okay, how do we do? Everybody picked
Right.
the same wrong answer. So what are we doing wrong? Where are we making the mistake? Formative, you can do it both ways.
Okay.
So for example, I might use formative for a quick quiz just to see how students are doing. So there I'm just collecting that data. But I can also have it immediately grade that and tell the students how they're doing. So I might do that right before a quiz. So it works both ways.
Thank you. My other question, back to the very first slide where you talked about the multiple
Yes.
things going. How do you manage that?
Well, that's the nice thing about it is you can sort of say to students, okay, you finished this, now you can go on to the next thing, and they know exactly where to go because it keeps it all in one place. So
And it stores this so that you can go back and look at it?
yes.
And does it go into an individual file for them as well?
Yes.
Their results, so they know where they are individually, you know where they are as a whole group.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? I talk really fast once I get going, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So while we're having Paul come up and get set up, one of the things I want to call to your attention is, so this is, Kirsten's cluster is half sixth grade, half seventh grade. So not only does she have three things going on in the same time, but she also has the grades are not at the same time in the classroom, but she's prepping for 2 grades and multiple activities with the same group of students in the class at the same time. It allows her to do what we call high ceiling, low floor, so that those who have already mastered the standard can get enrichment. Those who are in the middle can practice the standard, and those who need some teaching in order to meet the standard can get that at the same time.
Mr. Hayner?
Just a quick question on that. Is this, you said 6th and 7th graders, are they in the same class? Or are they?
No, she has 3 classes of 6th graders and 2 classes of 7th graders. But they have the same 4 teachers.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you meant you had 2 classes in the room at the same time.
No.
Okay, thank you.
She's good,
I'm
but she's
sorry.
not that
I
good.
misunderstood. I misunderstood. I was gonna say, she is really fantastic, managing all of that. She's awesome. You are anyway.
Okay, thank you. My name is, I'm Paul McKnight. I'm an English teacher at the high school. I teach 9th grade and 11th grade. A little background before explaining how I'm using Chromebooks. One of the things that we've appreciated so much is the ability to have some input into the tools that we use, where other departments favored, and other levels have favored iPads. We really wanted the Chromebooks. We felt that really worked in the English language arts and in some of the humanities. A year ago, we had 30 Chromebooks available for distribution among the English department. We signed these out whenever we wanted to use them in our classrooms. On the basis of the success and the popularity of those, we decided, myself, Nicole Edson, and Justin Barassa, 2 other English teachers, applied through the grant process, and each to have a set of the Chromebooks in our room. So now that we're really starting to pilot some one-on-one and different uses of the devices. This also kind of came about because I participated in the EdTech Teacher T21 course last year, along with a lot of the other high school teachers, which was really great for also introducing us to new apps at the same time. And so what I'd like to talk about is some of the different ways that we're starting to use these, and ways that we feel that they're really transforming the student learning, making our lives easier, and essentially also ways that they're not just word processors, that we're learning to use them in different types of tools, which I think also came about because of the EdTech teacher course. Just an overview before I want to focus on a particular method I've been trying out with the discussions, but some of the various applications that these are really useful for. So a big part of that is classroom management, as Christy talked about with the Google Classroom, the ability to communicate with students, the ability to send them each a file that they can edit and work on and collect, even as a way of submitting and papers and assignments and having those all sort of in one place. That's good for us as teachers. It's also, I think, good for students because many of them, they have several teachers who are all using this application. Obviously, you would expect that we'd be using it for writing, but as you know, the Google Apps have all of the collaborative tools of editing, suggesting, commenting. There's even apps for audio commentary as well as written comments. Reading, digital reading is I hadn't really thought about that as even a thing in and of itself, but there are ways in which we can use certain applications to really transform even the reading. I'll briefly kind of show you one of those. There are ways to change the ways that we have discussions in the classroom, which are a staple, and as you know, whether it's iPads or Chromebooks, it opens up a lot of tools which have students different ways of showing what they are learning. What is ramping up the facility, and I think the rapid increase with which we can use these are the way that the apps themselves are changing. I think what we are finding with the great thing about so many of these cloud-based or web-based apps is that you can get to them from anything. Students can even go on their phones and submit an assignment to Google Classroom because it's there, or they can go home and work on it. Desktops, laptops, iPads. So they're very convenient, they're very accessible. Most of these apps are now talking to each other, so there's the integration, or many of them are talking to each other. Of course, a benefit for students is that things are not lost, as you were asking, that the work that they do gets saved in many formats and can be saved and is auto-saved, so that's not so great because it gets harder for students to say, the dog ate my homework, and because we know where it is in the cloud. This, I think that for student learning, this idea of being able to see what students are thinking, making that thinking visible, knowing what they are learning and where they are stuck in ways that we couldn't see before. We were making educated guesses or looking at just heads but not knowing what was in them. This is a real wonderful benefit of so many of the applications that we're using. And then, as with this particular process, you'll see there's a novelty item, of course, with some of the technology with students, and some of them are just engaging in ways because they are visual, they're dynamic, and of course, anytime we get students excited or engaged is, they're involved in their learning. I know that you have been introduced to the SAMR model, which we learned about in faculty meetings and in the T21 class. And this is this idea of, at one point it'd be very easy just to sort of use these devices to substitute for an old task. And I think especially in the English classroom, we said, well, you can paper and pencil, or we can still read the books. Why would we want to read it on the Kindle, et cetera? Why, do we need to have a Chromebook in the classroom instead of going to a lab? Well, I hope that I can give you an idea of the fact that some of these applications really are letting us do things that we couldn't do before, and enhancing, if not fundamentally changing, learning. I have not used this. I've played around with it, but I just learned about this from one of the middle school teachers, this program called Actively Learn, and this would be an example. I'm going to try to focus on things that I would do in the classroom. Actively Learn is an application, a digital reading application. So what you can do with Actively Learn is take from a catalog or embed with your own classic texts, and what you can embed here are questions, open response questions, short answer questions, multiple choice questions that can act as gatekeepers so that students can work through, and then they stop when you want them to at a question and ask for that check of comprehension. So if you can imagine, I have a couple of classes of the Curriculum A level students and many foreign exchange students in there too who are all reading the Scarlet Letter or Huckleberry Finn. I know these are challenging texts for students. And if you imagine them all, not just in their books, where I don't know if they're reading the books in the classroom, what they're understanding, but if they're navigating through this online and they're reading and then they come to a question and they have to answer a comprehension question, and I can, with my device, monitor how they answered. I can see all of their answers to that question. They can progress through as they are. Of course, they could probably open up a browser page and look for the answer, but but I would walk around and make sure that they weren't doing that. But this is an idea of, and you can sort of, and you can use this application to actually assign, to push out reading assignments. But it's an example, and of course, they can click on any word and look it up. They can select the text and do text to speech if they want to hear it. And these are some of the ways in which digital reading can be fundamentally have enhancements that the text itself may not. Of course, I don't expect them to read the whole thing online. I wouldn't want them to. They still have the novels and they can read at home. Something I definitely plan to try. So the very method I would like to talk about in a little bit more detail is a discussion, a way that I've changed up some of my discussions using several applications. It seems like a long, maybe a cumbersome process. It's amazing how quick this is based on the ease with which these applications are changing. So very quickly, an overview. As a reading assignment, students read a text, a short story, a couple of chapters. I have a Google form that I just kind of replicate. Maybe once every week I can use this. So that students, after reading, there's some places where they can put in questions that they have about the reading. And then using an application called Today's Meet, I create on the spot a discussion, a chat room. Using the Google Classroom, I can quickly share a link to that. And then working in groups of 3, I will use their questions and the students will confer and share their responses using this chat room. So I have some screenshots here just to kind of elaborate on this. Here's a shot of what that Google form looks like. I'd like students, even though I'm touting technology here, I also want to make sure that students aren't being asked to spend a lot of time looking on a screen as part of their homework. So this is a very brief response. Again, I have a copy of this. I can easily replicate it. This is a AP class reading a Nathaniel Hawthorne short story. So there's a place for them to fill out. And further down, they have options for summarizing the reading in 3 words, posing a clarification question, and posing discussion questions. We've also worked with as a department on teaching students how to ask better questions and more sophisticated questions. I was using this last year as a way of knowing before the lesson started what my students had struggled with the reading, and knowing ahead of time what some discussion questions that they might ask as opposed to my own, and using those as the basis of class discussion. At the same time, that's an additional level of preparation and reading before I get into the classroom. And so it can be a lot to catch up on to make sure you take that extra preparation step, but it's still that idea of like making the thinking visible and the formative assessment. Here's an example of what that chart populates. The timestamps show me when students complete the assignment, that they've done it on time. The second circle here shows some of the words that they would have come up with for the story. I've turned these into the word clouds so we can see what are big themes. And then here's the view where I can actually see their discussion questions. This is what I will have one of the pages that I will have open in class. Once we are in, so that I can see if there are clarification questions, and then look for trends in the questions that they ask. When class starts, you do not need an account for this application. Today's Meet, very quickly, you make a name for your room. You can decide how long you're going to have the conversation open for. That's as easy as it is to set up. This is what the interface looks like. You enter your name. I ask the students to combine their first names to be a team name. And you have a 140-character box to post a message. In the classroom, group students, I think the key to this is not 1-to-1, which would be too many voices in the discussion, but 3-to-1. And so then as a team, they are sort of responding to the discussion. While I'm making that chat room, they're logging on. Someone's checking their email. Another feature of Classroom is how quickly you can just send out an email. You've got all your students, so whoever logs on to that Chromebook goes to his or her email, follows the link, and then this is what happens. So what I found is really useful here is then I'm moderating the discussion using their questions. So if there's a clarification question, I'll put that out as Q1, and they will respond after a few minutes. Post another question, and I can keep going back to that chart. But also run with a question depending on, still moderating discussion, see where the flow of conversation goes. Prompt for evidence. You can see that there's several quotes here. This is where that we had good answers but not enough evidence. And then you see students here working as a group, going back to the short story. And what they're, so they are having really 2 levels of discussion. I could take their questions and I could throw these out as class discussion questions, but you've got 1 student talking at a time. Here, you could have 21 students talking at a time. Or I could have them work in small groups, but then, yes, they're all talking at a time, but there's no central class discussion that they're all contributing to or that I am keeping track of. So I can see what they're thinking. And that's essentially sort of how it runs. Another advantage of this of application is it creates a transcript of the entire conversation. I find that this works best if it runs for about 25 minutes or so, not an entire period. But it's amazing how much you have here. And here's some students working from what is the central symbol here to this central question of, is it better that we come clean about the sins that we have within us, or keep them buried? And you can see that there's different points of view, and it nicely set up a closing discussion. And there are things you could do with that transcript, have students go back and read through it, pick out ideas, write about those ideas. And this can be also a precursor to an actual follow-up class discussion. So there is still that level of participation. I have done this with all of my classes. I've asked them what they have thought about it. The feedback has been entirely positive. They feel it is very engaging. They like it. It's fun. If you walk in, they're having a good time. But we're talking about the stories. The students have pointed out that this is less intimidating for the students that might otherwise refrain from speaking up in class. They have the benefit of conferring with other students, and which helps clarify their thinking. At the same time, they can see what other people in the class are thinking, and they all have felt that they've walked away with a better understanding of what it is what we've been reading. So that's basically the process. Just again, one of many tools we could be using.
Dr. Seuss.
Oh, yes, I have a few sort of just clarification questions, and I'm going to throw them all together because
Sure.
they're all just about a picture of the classroom. So I'm just sort of curious how many teachers are using these methods, how often, also questions about, are they all using Chromebooks, or some of them using their own devices? Just a picture of what it looks like across.
Right. So I would say, in the English department, I would say that probably over half of the department are using Chromebooks on a fairly regular basis. Again, there are 3 of us who have those in our room, and we use them all the time, but other people are constantly asking to borrow them. The extent of which they are using them for apps like these is varying. We're in the process of other people are trying this particular method. They might be using, I think it works when we talk to each other and other people take on the ideas. So I know several teachers have used a similar type of Google form for reading responses. They've been using Today's Meet for what we call a back channel during Socratic seminars, types of things. And for other tools instead, I think most, probably 2/3 of the teachers are using Classroom as a management tool. And I think just sort of getting their feet wet, I think, with these different applications. So I think that the level of exposure and integration is growing, but varies.
Mm-hmm. And are there any bring your own device type of things, or is this
Oh, yeah,
only?
that's right, yes.
Yeah.
Not really, not yet.
I know there was
I
some
think-
tough experimenting. I'm not sure if we've rolled it out yet, or
That's
Yeah.
at the middle school.
bring your own device
Yes.
at the high school.
No, we started at the middle school this year.
Oh.
There's a few people that get on in the high school, but not very many.
Oh, okay. I'd been,
Yeah.
the principal had made an announcement saying,
Yeah.
last year, saying that it was going to be at the high school.
We've been talking about it as like this is being kind of like one step towards that. What would it look like if, we took these, if we each had some of these devices and then we had students to bring in. I think one of the things that we found, as I said, students can use their phones for
Right,
some of
right.
these devices, certainly to tweet 140 characters, but at the same time, they wouldn't be able to see a screen where you can see the whole conversation, and it's still, so I think we're still trying to figure out what that might look like.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mr. Thielman?
Thank you. This is a great presentation. I'm just trying to get a picture of what the classroom looks like. I saw I don't know what slide it is, but there's a slide in there with, yeah, so 3 students
three,
around
13.
one Chromebook,
Yep.
and then you project on a screen, is that what you do, or
You can. I haven't.
you don't? Okay.
No. I've got my own. I'm watching my own. I'm my own screen. I'm watching the conversation, going back to their questions and going back to see how the conversation is. You can have it on a screen. There's no need to in this case because they're all looking at.
Oh, they're looking at the same.
Yeah, they're all looking at the same conversation.
Okay, so you got 3, and it's 3 kids around a Chromebook.
Yeah.
I get them. Thank you.
Mr. Hayner?
I think this is fantastic, and as a retired teacher, I envy you both with these awesome tools that you have. One minor question, the literature you're using is 18th century literature. Is your dictionary giving them those definitions?
That's a very good question.
The
I
reason-
haven't. Yeah.
The reason I ask is I had an exchange student from Japan, and she was in an AP class, and she was dealing with early 18th century language, and all she had was at that time, a 20th century dictionary, and it was not serving her
Yeah.
well. So just something to think, it's a minor thing.
Yeah, no, it's a great point with the, especially with the dictionaries built into the digital reading programs. Yeah,
Is it which level dictionary is, do you
I
know?
have to find out. I'll let you.
Thank you.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Thank you. So I see the last slide that has the student feedback, and I saw that the advantage of having the transcript of the conversation, but I'm just wondering, why else is this better than just having discussion, open-ended with all the kids talking?
Well, I certainly still do that and do plenty of that. I think in this case, when you're having a class discussion, it can, you've got one kid talking at the time. You may have 3 or 4 students who have their hands up, ready to talk, and 7 or 8 who are listening, and 9 or 10 who look like they're listening and not really present. And so I think that idea of I've always tried to engage as many of them at the same time as I could, and so I think it's better in that. And as I said, the other alternative is, well, just put them in groups and have them talk about the questions in their small groups, and I do plenty of that as well. I think, again, what this does is allow me to, them to also to be having a class discussion together, and me to moderate that class discussion, and really see what, and respond to it by follow-up questions, probing for evidence, guide it a little bit. So I think it's getting more of the students thinking through the questions I want them to be thinking about.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Thielman?
This is the first year we're using this, so we don't have any data to show if there's an improvement in grades or other assessments yet.
Right. So I think that's something I'm definitely looking at. So this is largely about in terms of the standards we're looking at, it's comprehension, understanding. A lot of this is about probing for better evidence and explaining those things. So it'll be interesting to see, to follow up. For me, the assessment that matters is when they write essays. How sophisticated are their ideas? How much of the evidence do they come back to use?
So this is the first quarter we're using this, right? So,
Yeah.
So you have no real, do you have a sense? Is it your instincts telling you anything, or it's too early to tell?
As anecdotally, I mean, I think the higher level of engagement in the class has to be benefiting their understanding of the text. They say that they understand more. I've been posting a question of like, what has your group learned from this discussion today? And it's the things they're posting are very insightful. So I'll be looking for that to see what.
All right,
yeah,
thanks.
but
Thanks a lot.
The
Thank you.
committee did get a report many of these techniques were also used by the 610 cluster that did the one-to-one pilot last year, and the committee did get a report last year from that cluster that gave some evidence of increased student achievement, and particularly time in learning. There was something like 12 or 13 additional hours that people had gotten in math last year because of the work that they were doing. But the thing I also want to caution, and actually Mr. McKnight and I were having a conversation about this beforehand, is that I actually asked him to come because he was being observed as part of the teacher evaluation system, and the director came to me and she said, I didn't know what to do. I said, what do you mean? She said, I didn't know what to do. I went into the classroom and all the kids were working and the teacher was conferring with somebody and the kids were working in small groups and some kids were working by themselves and there was nothing up on the board, and how did they know what to do? So I went over to a kid and I said, so how do you know what to do? And they brought up Google Classroom and they say, see, we're going to do this and then we're supposed to do this and then we're supposed to do that. And she just said, boy, the world has changed. So if we keep trying to, this is a definite paradigm shift, and I think that we need to be cautious to not use an older paradigm to determine what success is.
Well, if they're all engaged, that's usually,
The step in the right
you
direction.
should get a good evaluation if they're all engaged.
Can I?
Dr. Seuss.
Actually, I was wondering if Dr. Chesson could speak about our plans for the future in terms of, so what's seventh grade going to look like, for example? What's going to happen at the high school?
We're in the process of setting up the capital budget requests for next year. A lot of what will happen will be dependent on that. We've shown some good interest in parents at the sixth grade level for participating in BYOD. The more parents that would participate in that, the more quickly we'd be able to spread things throughout the other grades at the school. We've put Chromebooks in and iPads in 7th and 8th grade. I'm waiting to get feedback from those teachers as to which device they will ultimately prefer. Again, at the high school level, the teachers could pick, and depending on the subject area. And also the availability of biology really wanted iPads because of a book that they wanted, of the ability to do online labs, simulations of dissections, et cetera. They really wanted to be able to do that. So we'll have to look and see whether it's by department or, but that definitely BYOD is the way we're looking to go.
Okay, so then, actually, the BYOD is confusing to me because I know in sixth grade, you can bring something, but only a certain kind of iPad, right? So, and I remember last year at the high school, they were saying that they were experimenting with the idea of students bringing different platforms
Right.
and seeing if that would work. Is
Right,
that-
and we're continuing, I mean, little by little, if a student comes to the tech office and asks to have their device put on the network at the high school,
Mm-hmm.
we'll let them do that, but we didn't openly solicit that.
So we may not be experimenting with that as much.
Not as much,
Okay.
but however, the teachers at the high school, particularly the class that Mr. McKnight talked about, really is a course in how to use technology on device independent, so a lot of web-based tools, so it really wouldn't make any difference which device the students brought in, but we didn't really want to stress the teachers out any more than they're already
it.
stressed
Okay.
out.
Okay.
So that's why we kept it to one device in a classroom right now.
Okay, great.
So why do utopias need prisons? I love the question. I was just sitting there watching that slide go by and say, I'd love to hear what students have to say about that. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Slides.
I wouldn't have asked the question that.
Slide 16 showed a picture. Is this your classroom?
This one?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a partition?
It is a partition. Yeah, that's
How's that working for you?
What's on the other side?
the prison.
Oh, No, seriously, I mean, we're talking about facilities in the high school and seeing that we have somebody who's actually working in the building.
This was actually old hall in the high school. I think at one point it might have been divided into two rooms, and it was actually Stacy Kitsis, the current librarian, who we created that. We turned that into a classroom when we needed the room. She was the one that actually wanted to create that, not only a classroom but also a meeting room. Hence the seminar tables, and it was one of the first rooms in the school that had a ceiling-mounted and still the only ones that has a ceiling-mounted projector. And then the partitions were set up because the room could be shared, so there could be. I think there were two teachers. The one had desks behind there. So
Yeah, and from what I understand, the English department has some of the best rooms in the school.
yes,
Yeah.
not all
Okay.
with cubicle dividers.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Just,
Ms.
one thing I
Starks.
noticed is, and only because I'm worrying about this about my own students as well, the timestamps on when these students put their stuff in. I'm noticing 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 12:08 in the morning. We got to talk to them about that. They should be asleep at 08
Agreed.
on 1/6, 11/6.
By the way,
Just saying.
yeah, I never.
I know it's not your fault.
No,
I'm
no.
not in any way saying it's a bad thing.
But I-
this
Collecting
is-
data
you
and
know, we
opening cans
also-
of worms.
Right, no, but I know, we are doing the same thing at our school. We're noticing that more and more as we have more things and kids are checking them in online, and we see kids submitting homework at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. We're having, those are also having, it's good because we're starting to have those conversations about what are you doing at midnight, posting your homework, like, come on, go to bed.
Most times the students have a post, whether it's a discussion post or any kind of online post, I usually give them 2 or 3 days notice. I usually don't like to say, here's something I like you to post by tomorrow.
Right.
Rare. So that's on them. Even with 2 or 3 days they're
I know,
they're
it
still
was on
posting at the
time,
last
but
minute.
yeah, I
but yes,
know,
it
right?
is.
Ugh.
That's another little piece of information we didn't have before. But
Yeah,
suspected.
exactly. I think it's very interesting information.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.